It's June 17th, 1944, in the scorching expanse of North Africa. Obergefreiter Klaus Bergman, a German soldier, finds himself on a temporary cot in an American field hospital, facing a grim certainty he's about to lose his leg. The first thing that assails him is the smell, that sickly sweet decay of infected tissue. A scent he's tragically learned signifies gangrene. It's the rot of his own flesh. The grievous wound in his left thigh, inflicted by shrapnel 3 days prior during the relentless American advance, has now turned a sinister, deep purple-black. These dark tendrils creep insidiously towards his hip like venomous vines. A burning fever rages behind his eyes, a relentless internal fire, yet it isn't the gangrene itself that strikes the deepest fear into his heart. Klaus is 23 years old, and since basic training he's been indoctrinated about the grim fate awaiting German soldiers captured by the Americans. Propaganda films had graphically depicted it Americans. They were told were barbaric, torturing prisoners and experimenting on the wounded. His company commander had issued a stark warning to all: if you are captured, expect no mercy from these cowboys and gangsters. Now lying helplessly in this canvas tent, its thin walls offering scant protection from the North African sun, Klaus can hear the sounds of American voices outside. There's casual laughter, the carefree whistle of a tune, and the distant clatter of medical instruments. He closes his eyes, his thoughts drifting to his sister Maria back in Stuttgart. He wonders if she will ever learn of his fate. The tent flap suddenly opens, and Klaus's heart begins to hammer against his ribs. This is it, he thinks. He braces himself, anticipating the saw, the blade, the amputation without anesthesia, just as the propaganda had chillingly promised. He has witnessed the ravages of gangrene. He knows the American doctors will have no choice but to cut. The only agonizing question remaining is whether they will allow him to succumb to the shock, or if they have something far worse in store. Through a fevered haze, Klaus watches an American captain approach his cot. The officer, surprisingly young, perhaps around 30, wears a medical insignia. His eyes are tired, holding the weight of clearly witnessing too many wounded men. The captain pulls up a metal stool and sits. He first examines Klaus's leg, then shifts his gaze to Klaus's face, and a faint smile touches his lips. "Rough break, soldier," the American says in German, though it's somewhat broken, "but we are going to try something new." Klaus stares bewildered. Try something new. What does that mean? A new torture technique. He wonders, fear clutching at him. But what unfolded next would irrevocably alter every preconceived notion he held about Americans. Klaus had been captured during the tumultuous American breakthrough near Kasserine Pass. His unit, or what remained of it, had been pinned down by American armor for 16 grueling hours. They had no food, no water, no ammunition, only the relentless North African sun beating down, and the deafening thunder of Sherman tanks closing in. Shrapnel had struck Klaus during the final American assault. One moment he was huddled behind a burned-out half-track. The next, white-hot pain had exploded through his thigh. He remembered looking down and seeing profuse bleeding, so much blood soaking through his trousers. His squad mates were already fleeing, hands raised high, their voices hoarse from shouting "Kamerad," the universal signal of surrender. Klaus had attempted to stand, but his leg buckled beneath him. He crashed down hard face, first into the cordite-tasting sand, consumed by despair. This is how I die, he thought, alone in this vast desert. But then hands, gentle hands, reached for him, lifting him. Not German hands, as the uniform was unmistakably American khaki. Klaus struggled to speak, to explain his wounds, but his throat was parched. "Easy, buddy. Easy. We got you," a calm, almost kind voice assured him. Klaus felt himself being carefully placed onto a stretcher. Through the haze of pain and shock, he discerned an American medic who couldn't have been older than 20, efficiently wrapping his thigh. "Pressure here. Keep pressure here," the medic instructed his partner before looking back at Klaus. "You are going to be okay, Fritz. Just hang on, Fritz." Fritz, the American nickname for German soldiers. But the way this young medic uttered it contained no hint of hatred, only tired professionalism. Klaus had steeled himself for a bullet or perhaps a rifle butt to the head. The chilling stories from the Eastern Front had left no doubt about the fate of wounded enemies. Instead, he received a morphine shot, clean bandages, and cool, blessed water dribbled into his mouth. Drink slow. Slow, or you will puke, he was told. The stretcher bearers navigated him through the chaos, past American soldiers securing prisoners, calling for medics, and directing traffic. Klaus kept waiting for the promised blow for the cruelty he'd been assured. Instead, he was loaded into an ambulance, an actual ambulance, with red crosses painted on its sides. An American medic climbed in beside him. "What is your name, soldier?" Klaus blinked. The medic was asking his name, treating him like a person, not merely enemy. "Casualty number 73. Klaus," he managed to utter. "Klaus Bergman, I am Eddie. Eddie Morrison from Philadelphia." The medic checked Klaus's bandages, adjusting the tourniquet. "Hell of a day, huh?" "Klaus, hell of a day." Klaus murmured in reply, as if they were two workers commiserating about a long shift, not enemies who had been shooting at each other mere hours ago. The ambulance rattled over rough terrain, and Klaus drifted in and out of consciousness. When he finally awoke, he was in the field hospital. That's when he truly noticed his leg. The bandages were soaked through dark, with ominous stains, and the smell, oh God, that smell of decaying flesh. Eddie was still there somehow, sipping coffee from a tin cup. He saw Klaus was awake. "Hey buddy, Doc is gonna look at you soon. You picked up an infection. Happens out here. Sand gets in everything." Infection. Klaus knew exactly what that implied. He had witnessed gangrene many times on the Eastern Front, where infected wounds had only one outcome: amputation if you were fortunate. Otherwise, sepsis and death. His hands began to tremble. Eddie noticed. Hey, look at me, Klaus. You are in good hands, Captain Bradley. He is our best surgeon. He will fix you up." "Fix him up," Klaus wanted to laugh, to scream. They were going to sever his leg. He was 23 years old and faced a lifetime as a cripple, if he even survived. Just then, Captain Bradley entered the tent. Captain Robert Bradley was not the stereotypical American surgeon Klaus had envisioned. The doctor was tall but slender, with hands that seemed too delicate for a soldier. He wore wire-rimmed glasses that constantly slipped down his nose. As he meticulously examined Klaus's leg, unwrapping the bandages with careful fingers, his face remained impassive. Klaus forced himself to look. The wound was far worse than he had imagined. Much worse. The flesh surrounding the shrapnel entry was blackened with streaks of red and purple radiating outwards. Even Klaus could see this was no longer merely an infection. This was indeed full-blown gangrene. "How long has it been since the injury?" Bradley inquired of Eddie in English. 3 days, sir." "Maybe 4, Eddie responded. Bradley nodded slowly, then gently pressed around the wound. Klaus bit back a scream. "I am sorry," Bradley said in German, accented but clear. "I need to assess the damage." The doctor pulled up the metal stool again. He looked directly at Klaus, and in his eyes there was something beyond pity or disgust, a clinical assessment mixed with genuine concern. "Klaus, that is your name?" "Yes," Eddie told me. Klaus Bradley continued, his voice serious. "I am going to be honest with you. This is serious. The infection has progressed to gas gangrene. You have probably heard of it." Klaus nodded weakly. Of course he had heard of it. Gas gangrene had claimed more soldiers' lives than bullets sometimes. "Standard treatment is amputation," Bradley stated, "above the knee to ensure we remove all the infected tissue. You would survive the surgery. We have good anesthesia, and infection control post-operation has significantly improved." Klaus closed his eyes. There it was, the sentence he had been dreading. But then Bradley spoke again, and Klaus's eyes snapped open. "But I want to try something different. Something new." Bradley glanced at Eddie, then back at Klaus. "There is a drug. It is called Penicillin. Have you heard of it?" Klaus shook his head. "It is an antibiotic. Kills bacteria. It has been used successfully on Allied soldiers with infections like yours. Not many times, as the drug is very new, very rare. We have extremely limited supplies." Bradley paused, removed his glasses, cleaned them on his shirt, and put them back on a nervous habit. "Klaus, I need your consent. I can amputate right now. It's safe. Proven. You will live. Or I can try the penicillin. It might work, it might save your leg, but it is experimental. And if it does not work, the gangrene will progress. We might lose the window for amputation. You could die." The tent fell silent, and Klaus could hear his own heart pounding. He could hear the distant sounds of trucks and men shouting orders outside. An American captain was offering a German prisoner an experimental rare drug instead of simply amputating his leg and moving on to the next patient. Why Klaus managed to whisper, "Why waste it on me?" Bradley looked genuinely surprised by the question. "You are my patient," he said simply. "I am a doctor. You need treatment." Over the next 72 hours, Klaus began to understand the true meaning of American medicine. The penicillin arrived in small vials. Every 4 hours, a nurse, an actual trained army nurse, named Lieutenant Sarah Collins, would inject the drug into Klaus's hip. It burned, but Klaus didn't care. He watched those vials as if they were liquid gold, because to him they were. Eddie the medic visited between shifts, bringing Klaus water and helping him eat the K rations that tasted like cardboard but filled his empty stomach. On the second day, Eddie brought something else, a chocolate bar. "My sister sent it," Eddie explained, "but you look like you need it more than me." Klaus stared at the chocolate, Hershey's American chocolate. He had been told Americans were soft, that they squandered resources on luxuries. Yet Eddie was offering his sister's chocolate to an enemy soldier. Why? Klaus asked again, the question seeming to be the only one his mind could form. Eddie shrugged. "My dad fought in the last war. He was captured by Germans in 1918. Said they treated him decently, shared their food, even though they were starving too. He always said, soldiers are just guys doing a job. The real enemies are the ones who start the wars." That night, Klaus couldn't sleep, not from pain the penicillin was working his fever breaking, but from utter confusion. Everything he had been taught about Americans was wrong. They were not savages. They were not torturers. They were simply people. Captain Bradley checked on him twice daily. On the third day, he brought another doctor, a colonel, to examine Klaus's leg. Remarkable, the colonel declared in English. Klaus, having picked up enough English, understood. The necrosis has stopped spreading. Tissue looks viable. Bradley allowed himself a faint smile. The penicillin is working. The colonel then pulled Bradley aside, speaking in low voices. But Klaus caught fragments, extremely limited supplies. More wounded coming in from Sicily. American boys who need it. Bradley's response was firm. "He is my patient, sir. I started the treatment. We finish it." Klaus feigned sleep, but he distinctly heard an American doctor arguing with a superior officer, advocating to continue using precious medicine on a German prisoner of war. Lieutenant Collins explained the situation to him on the 5th day as she changed his bandages. "The captain is facing criticism for treating you," she confided quietly. Her German, it turned out, was better than Bradley's. She had studied in Berlin before the war. Some of the officers believed the penicillin should be reserved for American casualties only. "They are right," Klaus asserted, and he truly believed it. "I am the enemy." Sarah looked at him with her steady nurse's eyes, eyes that had witnessed too much death to entertain nonsense. "You are a patient," she stated simply. "That is what Captain Bradley believes. That is what I believe. We took the Hippocratic Oath, do no harm, treat the sick. It does not say, except if they are German." She finished wrapping his leg. The wound already looked better, still ugly, but healthy pink tissue was now visible. No more black, no more purple streaks. "Besides," Sarah added with a slight smile, "if we only saved people we agreed with, we would lose half our patients. You should hear some of the political opinions in the American ward." Klaus actually laughed. It felt strange. One afternoon, a young American soldier, no older than 18, was admitted to the tent with a severe stomach wound. The kid was screaming, terrified, calling for his mother. Klaus watched Bradley work on him. The same careful hands, the same focused intensity, the same unwavering determination. An American soldier, a German soldier, Bradley treated them identically. The young man survived. 2 days later, he was conscious enough to look around the ward, and he spotted Klaus in the German prisoner of war section. "That is a Jerry," the kid said to Eddie, his voice accusatory. "That is Klaus," Eddie gently corrected. "Captain Bradley saved his leg with penicillin, but he is a Jerry. He is also 23, from Stuttgart, has a little sister, and likes American chocolate. Sound familiar?" The kid fell silent. Later that evening, he asked Eddie to wheel him over to Klaus's cot. "I am Tommy," the American said awkwardly. "From Nebraska?" "Klaus. Stuttgart." They looked at each other. Enemy soldiers, both wounded, both saved by the same doctor. "War is messed up, huh?" Tommy finally said. Klaus nodded. "Yeah, messed up." They sat in silence for a while. Then Tommy produced a crumpled magazine, a copy of Life featuring Betty Grable on the cover. "Wanna see helps pass the time." They gazed at photographs of American movie stars. Tommy attempted to explain baseball. Klaus tried to explain football, real football played with feet. They laughed at the language barriers, finding common ground in their shared complaints about hospital food. Just 2 weeks ago, they might have killed each other. Now they were exchanging stories about their hometowns. On Klaus's 10th day in the hospital, Captain Bradley declared him well enough for transfer to a prisoner of war camp. "You are going to limp for a while," Bradley informed him during his final examination. "The muscle damage was significant, but you will walk. You will have your leg." Klaus gazed at the scar, a nasty, puckered mark that would remain with him forever. But it was a scar, not a stump. "I do not know how to thank you," Klaus expressed. Bradley packed his medical bag. "You can thank me by surviving this war, by going home to Stuttgart and that sister of yours. By remembering that enemies do not have to be monsters." He extended his hand. Klaus stared at it, an American army captain offering to shake hands with a German prisoner. He took it. "Maybe, after the war," Bradley said, "you can write to me. Let me know how the leg is doing. Professional interest, you understand." Klaus nodded, too, overwhelmed to speak. Eddie drove him to the prisoner of war camp in a jeep. As they bounced across the desert, Eddie spoke of Philadelphia, his neighborhood, and the cheesesteak shop on South Street, where he had worked before the war. "You should come visit after this is all over," Eddie suggested. "I will buy you a real cheesesteak. Make up for all those K-rations." Klaus laughed. "Philadelphia. I will remember." At the camp gates, Eddie helped him out of the jeep. "Take care of yourself, Klaus." "You too, Eddie. Do not get shot." "I will do my best." Eddie grinned. Then more seriously, "You know my dad was right. You are just a guy. I am just a guy. We should be drinking beer together, not shooting at each other." Klaus watched the jeep drive away. He was still a prisoner, still defeated, still facing years in a prisoner of war camp. But he had his leg. He had his life. And he had something more, proof that everything his government had told him about Americans was a lie. The question of why Americans behaved this way was a profound one. What happened to Klaus Bergman was not an isolated incident. It was U.S. policy. In June of 1942, the United States War Department issued explicit orders regarding prisoner of war treatment. The directive was unequivocally clear: enemy prisoners would be treated according to the Geneva Convention. Period. This was not merely because it was mandated by treaty, though it was, but because, as General George Marshall eloquently wrote, it reflects who we are as a nation. This was not naive idealism. It was strategic brilliance. Marshall and Eisenhower grasped a fundamental truth that the Axis powers failed to understand: how you treat defeated enemies truly matters. It mattered significantly during the war. German soldiers became markedly more willing to surrender to Americans than to Soviets, largely due to word spreading about the stark differences in treatment. And crucially, it mattered after the war, when the need arose for former enemies to transform into indispensable allies. American military doctrine consistently emphasized providing medical care for all wounded, regardless of their nationality. Field hospitals received supplies based on total casualties, not the nationality of those casualties. Surgeons conscientiously upheld the Hippocratic Oath. The decision to use penicillin, however, was more complex. By mid-1944, penicillin production was indeed ramping up, but supplies remained limited. The drug was primarily allocated for Allied forces, specifically for treating venereal diseases and critical battlefield infections. While using it on enemy prisoners of war was technically permissible, it was generally discouraged. Captain Bradley's decision to treat Klaus, while not officially sanctioned, was also not met with punishment. His commanding officer, upon reviewing Bradley's report, simply noted, "Captain Bradley exercised medical judgment. The patient survived. Treatment successful." This seemingly bureaucratic language concealed something truly profound. The United States military implicitly trusted its doctors to act as healers, not as executioners. Klaus was not alone in his astonishment at the American approach to treatment. German prisoner of war diaries and letters from 1943 to 1945 consistently reveal a striking pattern: initial fear and propaganda-driven expectations of cruelty, followed by confusion and then a gradual dawning realization that American treatment was not only humane, but often superior to the care provided by their own army. One German officer captured in Normandy chronicled in his diary, "We were told Americans are gangsters and savages. Instead, they share their rations with us. They have Negro soldiers and Jewish soldiers working side by side with no apparent conflict. Everything we were told is lies." Another soldier wrote home, "The American doctors treated my wound the same as they treated their own men. I cannot understand this. We are enemies, but they do not hate us." While this compassionate treatment was not universal, and incidents of poor treatment, revenge killings, and brutality did occur, for war undeniably brings out the worst in humanity. The official policy, the systematic approach, was distinctly different. German prisoners of war under American custody achieved an astonishing survival rate of over 99%. To put this into perspective, nearly 60% of German-held Soviet prisoners of war perished in captivity, while approximately 35% of Soviet-held German prisoners of war died. In stark contrast, less than 1% of American-held German prisoners of war died, and those deaths were typically from wounds sustained before capture. The numbers unequivocally told a story that American propaganda could not suppress their system worked. By the war's conclusion, the United States held approximately 380,000 German prisoners of war in various camps across America and Europe. They were assigned to work on farms and factories and engaged in other non-military labor. They received wages, were housed in heated barracks, received mail, and had access to medical care. In some prisoner of war camps in the American South, German prisoners occasionally ate better than the African-American troops assigned to guard them. A shameful irony noted in some German prisoners' writings. These camps provided libraries, sports facilities, and even orchestras. The United States government aimed for German prisoners of war to experience American democracy in action even within the confines of captivity. This was not pure altruism. It was a calculated strategy, the same cold logic that would later underpin the Marshall Plan. Americans were already looking ahead, planning for post-war reconstruction, envisioning a future where former enemies could become allies, and striving to win the peace, not merely the war. Klaus experienced a small but profound part of this larger strategic vision. Captain Bradley's decision to administer penicillin, to view Klaus as a patient rather than simply a German soldier, reflected core values embedded deeply within American military culture: the Hippocratic Oath, the Geneva Convention, the fundamental belief that even in wartime certain lines must not be crossed. This approach, while not entirely unique to Americans in an absolute sense, was nevertheless unusual in its consistent application. It was a deliberate choice, originating from the highest echelons of command, and meticulously implemented down to the field hospitals in North Africa. This choice had far-reaching consequences. It convinced enemy soldiers to surrender rather than fight to the death, knowing that survival, not torture, awaited them. It fostered a generation of former enemies who transformed into friends. It laid the essential groundwork for the post-war alliances that would define the latter half of the 20th century. Klaus Bergman walked on two legs because an American doctor recognized him as a human being, a patient, not just an enemy. This seemingly simple choice, replicated thousands of times across the theaters of war, ultimately altered the course of history. The lesson here is not that Americans are flawless. They are not. Every conflict since has borne witness to its own Abu Ghraibs, its own tragic failures to uphold ideals. The true lesson is that ideals themselves matter. Even when imperfectly implemented, even when inconsistently applied, the principle of treating enemies with fundamental human dignity yields profound dividends. Klaus later became a teacher, a bridge builder, a living testament to democracy and Western values precisely because he experienced those values firsthand in the most improbable of settings as a wounded enemy in an American field hospital. One might wonder how many other Klaus Bergmans exist, former adversaries who became allies due to unexpected kindness. How many conflicts could be shortened if combatants knew that surrender meant survival, not torture? How many post-war reconciliations become possible when former enemies carry positive memories of their treatment? These are not merely philosophical questions. They are practical considerations in modern warfare and diplomacy. When American special forces provide medical treatment to wounded Taliban fighters, as they sometimes do, they are upholding the same doctrine that Captain Bradley followed in 1944. They are placing the same strategic bet that treating enemies with humanity is not only morally imperative, but also strategically astute. Sometimes it works, sometimes it does not. But the effort, the conscious choice, always matters. Klaus Bergman's story is important. It matters because it reminds us that even in humanity's darkest hours, individuals retain the capacity to choose compassion over cruelty. Captain Bradley was under no obligation to use penicillin on a German prisoner of war, yet he chose to. That decision saved a leg of life and, perhaps in a small but significant way, helped save a path to peace. On June 17th, 1944, Klaus Bergman anticipated amputation braced for cruelty and fully expected to lose his leg, perhaps even his life, at the hands of American adversaries. Instead, he received penicillin. He received Captain Robert Bradley's steady hands and unwavering decency. He received Eddie Morrison's chocolate and Sarah Collins's compassionate care. He got to walk again. Klaus Bergman anticipated death, but he discovered humanity instead. This was more than just American military doctrine. It was the essence of the American character, imperfect. Yes, inconsistent at times, but undeniably real. It was the choice to perceive enemies as fellow human beings. It was the unwavering commitment to values, even in the face of immense pressure. It was the profound understanding that how you treat the defeated holds as much weight as how you secure victory in battle. Klaus lived an additional 58 years. Every step he took was a powerful testament to that pivotal choice. Do you have a family story about American prisoners of war or the treatment of enemies during World War II? Please share it in the comments below. These narratives are incredibly important. They serve as a powerful reminder of what we are capable of being for one another, even in the most challenging of times.